This is Good Girl Gone Human, an ongoing conversation that serves the frequency of rehumanization. We believe that in striving towards being good and away from being bad, we can lose touch with our humanity and uniqueness. Our hope is that in expanding our capacity to accept our own humanity, we expand the capacity to accept and hold each other's humanity as well.
We welcome uncertainty and questions with curiosity. This is not a roadmap for the right way to be human. We hold tenderly how seductive and human it is to reach for a formula that will provide a sense of certainty and safety. This is not that place, but rather a place for dropping into our big, messy questions.
This isn't just for the recovering good girls out there, but for every human who desires to peel off the layers that hide the wholeness of who they are.
We want to tell the stories of how messy and complicated and beautiful it is to find ourselves in the aftermath of this shedding. There is space for your story, and we want you to join us on this journey of rehumanization.
Hey humans, welcome back. Feeling so excited to have you all back because today is the first time that we have a guest here with us. And there's some new energy in the room, and it's feeling really sweet. Kristina and I were talking before because we've been building this framework and fleshing out the concept of Good Girl Gone Human, fleshing out what exists within this framework, and then very lovingly and carefully choosing people who we want to add their own richness and their story to the conversation. And so we've gotten to that point. This is our first guest, and it feels new and exciting, and it feels like we're ready to open this up to being a community project, to pull the people that we know and we love dearly to add to this conversation. And so we have Dave here today. He's my new friend and Kristina's longtime friend. So Kristina, do you want to tell us about Dave?
Yes, I do.
As if he's not in the room. Hi, Dave.
Hey. Hi, Dave. Dave's here. Dave Thompson is someone who came to my mind quickly when we started this project and we were brainstorming. And you'll know why soon. He is an awesome guy. I love him. Love you. And I've known him for about a decade now, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. But he is married to one of my dear friends for almost 22 years. Mm-hmm. And he has been a first responder for 23 years, which is crazy. You started really young. That's why that number is so high. I'm like, how can that be? Even like your marriage number. I'm like, wait, what? How can that be? But Dave is somebody who I feel embodies this conversation. In our conversations, I always leave feeling encouraged, and they're very thought-provoking. And so it felt like a gift to the people that I love to share what it's like to have a conversation with Dave here. So Dave, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for saying yes to doing this.
Well, first, lower whatever your expectations are. So Brooke tells me that most things in life that I have disappointment around are because I have too high of expectations. So for your listening, viewing audience, and more importantly for you personally, let's start with some low expectations. And then it's only going up.
That's right. Yeah.
Fair. We'll do that for you.
No, I'm tremendously humbled. You guys have a lot invested in this. I love the concept with only having just a small preview of where this is going, that you would think of me or want me to participate. So you'll learn probably through this conversation. I'm an Enneagram type 2, could care less about my own needs, very concerned about not letting you down. And the other thing, just kind of thinking through being here, obviously I feel totally inadequate to discuss anything at length with any sort of profound wisdom, but I'm happy to share with you kind of my firsthand experience of the things that I've walked through and learned along the way, and how you think they're relevant to your conversation and the frequency that you're hoping to encourage. So let's do it.
I love that attitude, because we say all the time, we're like, we kind of don't know what we're doing, and we are human. And the whole point of this, right, is to like embrace the fact that this isn't polished up. We don't have to have all the answers. And so I love just your posture of showing up and saying, well, here's what I have to offer, which is you, the whole spectrum of who you are. And so as we talk about how these kind of topics have shown up in your life, there's a sweetness to knowing that like you're not here trying to like prove anything or that you have this big agenda, you know? I think that's really sweet.
Yeah, and also like holding this tension of, we didn't ask you here because we're like, we've deemed him as like a good person and now he has to uphold this like some sort of standard. But there's so much tension and then coming here in this like kind of more professional setting with our fancy mics and then be like, don't worry about being good. Like, of course, we talked about it in our first episode. We're trying really hard to be good at this and to share our thoughts well and to share ourselves well. So as much as you can, we invite you to just put down that, oh, I have to be really good at this because I've just barely gotten to know you and I love just sitting with you and hearing what you have to say. So we're here to just be curious about Dave, and you don't have to be good, bad, right, wrong. Just we're so excited to hear your experiences. You have a lot to offer. So I'm curious if you want to start by telling us a little bit about, you know, you choose where you start, first responder, fatherhood. Like there's so much here. Like, what are you feeling pulled to share?
Well, yeah, as far as like where my personal experiences kind of integrate into your conversation, Good Girl Gone Human, can you go a little bit further? And you probably, maybe in a way that would be lend itself to understanding for a boy.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it's dawning on me now. It's like Good Girl Gone Human. Our first guest is a man. And so,
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Our token good girl, resident good girl,
Yes.
Dave Thompson.
Yes. And just for anyone who is not watching this, Kristina is wearing a shirt that says "Boys Ugh," and it's a
the Little
from Little
Rascals.
Rascals, Darla.
The girls sleep over there.
Yes.
Boys.
So it is quite funny.
It's funny, but it's also intentional. When we
Yes.
were planning out season 1, because we say this isn't just for girls, it mattered a lot to me to bring on a man and hear that male perspective on this. But I think the essence of it, right? Like Good Girl Gone Human, it's like person trying to be perceived as good gone human. So for you, like growing up, was that something, even as a good boy, we'll say, you know, is that something that you experienced? What was that like for you growing up?
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. So I think we kind of all come out of what was a strong movement of like an evangelical interpretation of faith, right? Which was right, wrong, or indifferent, had a formula for success. And part of that was having the kids kind of looking, acting, being a certain way, especially as a reflection of their parents. And so, yeah, I felt strongly within that framework for sure. What's kind of unique about my experience as a firefighter that I learned early on, because I grew up very much a goody two shoes, like legitimate. And like you were discussing, I started that career path super early. I got hired in my first full-time employment at 20 years old. Brooke and I got married at 20. We were off to the races, you know, living this dream of an adult life as kids. And what I found really quick in that social arena, and I think this will tie into kind of what the Good Girl Gone Human is kind of like the social implications of reward that's confining us maybe beyond who we are as individuals or what is necessary as humans at this point in the evolutionary process. So, yeah, I find I'm dramatically out of place here, right? These individuals have an entirely different set of values, and they do not align with mine, right? And so the social acceptance push there was to actually be bad. It wasn't to be good. And so I kind of lived between this dichotomy of family origins where I was pushing the limits and not being good, and then in a social work arena where I was a really good kid that was okay being a good kid that was like trying to be bad. So I can remember specifically early on, we go to a Christmas party and there's this senior guy and he's walking past me. He goes, under his breath, drunk, shocker. That's the normal for firefighters. in every social setting, hopefully not at work, but sometimes, he makes a comment in passing under his breath, like, "You fucking Boy Scout." Right. And I was like, I don't even know this guy. Like, why is this such an affront to him? But I realized right away, like, oh, I'm different than this crowd. And it's taken me the better part of 20 years of that experience to be like, yeah, I'm kind of just a decent guy that would rather go home to his fam and live somewhat controlled in my freedoms. And that's okay. That's who I am. Right. So I was wondering if it made sense for you guys, at least the concept at which you entered into the title of the conversation, that is maybe more around, hey, what's the social constructs that have been applied to us that's so limiting of who we are as individuals? Right?
That is precisely it. Yeah, thanks for drawing that out, because it's no matter what setting we find ourselves in, like to survive, like it starts in childhood, right? Like to survive, we're scanning the environment for like, how do I stay safe? How do I belong? And so when you're in like a group, there is kind of like a subtle group think going on, like, and there's a risk to being different. And so I'm curious, in that example of being a young firefighter and then slowly realizing like, I don't fit here. Was there initially pressure to be kind of like bad, quote unquote? And could you tell us a little bit more about the journey of, did you do that to fit in? Did it work? What happened when you aligned yourself more with who you actually feel inside?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the social pressure, especially early on, is everybody parties and they party really, really hard. Right. So it's a type A male dominated field. It's super necessary for a lot of the work that we do. But it's full throttle all the time, on and off work. Right. And so, yeah, there's definitely a pressure as far as social acceptance, because so much of it is story sharing around those experiences. Right. In an inclusionary, like sharing, right? Coming back, telling of those tales. Yeah. If you're on the out of that, you're not in, you're not cool, you're not going anywhere. You could be marginalized. And I had the really, really unique benefit of being married early, which is surprising, because that has not, I would say, been the standard for success, right? I mean, we're talking like partially formed prefrontal cortex age, and here we are living this life married. But I had so much fun with Brooke. I had the stability to know, like, no matter kind of how that day went, I had that to go home to. That we were able to navigate those years. And some of, like, we joke because we missed out on the whole college experience or going away and finding ourselves, that we kind of did that together in our 20s. And that was, you know, maybe where I became more human to the people around me, that I wasn't such a goody two shoes, that I was walking into the area of acceptance in a way that was fun without blurring the lines too much. And as I've gotten into my 40s now, I'm just so affirmed of who I am that I'm really not worried about it. And what is shocking, which I think is true for all of us when we're living from an authentic space, like really true to ourselves, like there's going to be a combination of people that think you're crazy no matter who you are, a combination of people that love you no matter who you are,
sure,
and a whole bunch of people in the middle that really just don't care. Right.
Totally.
And so you might as well do your thing. And specific to the work environment, maybe beyond what I had hoped as a measure of success, I'm accepted in most arenas, right? I have really strong connection with a variety of people that walk all sorts of different crazy lives and are looking to get totally different things out of that work experience. So yeah, we've talked about this, the intersection of vulnerability and living from a place of authenticity is genuine relationship, right? It's not pretense. It's not the reward for behavior. It's just being, right?
Yeah.
And I think just as you're identifying that need in your community and trying to assist people along with that need, that's out there. and people are thirsty for that. And so when you have the opportunity, you feel like, yeah, I'm really who I am in this moment with this person. It's very different, right? And yet there's genuine connection. And then from that connection, there's the potential of real relationship. So, yeah.
And that's like real belonging, like true belonging, because you could try to fit in, and do the thing. And at some point it's going to crack because that's not who you really are. And so when you settle into like, okay, I guess this is the way that I am. Maybe I am just good, quote, quote, like I've been trying to be something else, but this is like how I want to be. And then to see that acceptance come around, that is like what everybody wants. That's that true belonging that we talk about, I think it's interesting in your story too, when you talk about getting married younger, and so much of that I would think was about kind of the faith community you were into. And so
100%.
I'm curious how, as your acceptance of who you are and settling into that, and your faith kind of having this transition, was there an intersection of that at work? Was there an intersection of, that belonging piece and that authenticity piece with your faith and this professional arena?
Oh yeah, that only further compounded the difficulty in connecting with people, right? Because it was just so fundamental. It was so extreme. It was no sex before marriage, just unbelievable ridicule, as you can imagine, like just gnarly. A lot of being the butt of people's jokes, right? What was the second part of that?
Like how, as you became more aware of the places you weren't being authentic, is that part of what helped you with your faith transition, or like bolstered your faith transition? Like, I'm realizing I'm not authentic here. Was that part of the faith journey for you? Like learning how to stretch out what you believe? Did they happen at the same time? Were they related at all? Or was it just kind of two different things that...
So I don't want to paint a false sense that I've been like authentic from day one, but lots of errors and missteps along the way. But one of the benefit of a strong upbringing that I would say is in a value system, right? Like my parents read the book of virtues as family devotion time. Like having that so conditioned early on in my life, it's not something that I've ever wanted to get away from, right? I've been okay with those things in my life. And so walking the decades now in that career field, I kind of always was who I was. I just gained an acceptance around being that person. So instead of being outcasted, now it was like, oh, Dave's rad, cares about his family. He's cool at work, does a good job on calls. Like I'm into Dave's program, right? Less about what a weirdo, Yeah.
Do you think they were perceiving judgment from you? Like if you were separate, the part of the not liking you or ostracizing you was that they were feeling judged?
Yeah, possibly. Well, and like in psychology, mirror theory, right, is like we don't know anything about ourselves until it's mirrored back to us in parenting. And there's a thought that exists even into adulthood, that when something's a front to us, it's really not the individual or the thing. It's really something that should be identified in our own life. So yeah, there's a possibility in that. I also think there's a wide gap in generations in those first years of me working there, right? And me being somebody that's maybe a different, more emotional, wanting something more holistic out of a work experience, maybe lends itself to connecting to even what is the younger workforce now than the older. Yeah.
Interesting. The word acceptance is really sticking out to me because, like you said, you're like, I wasn't authentic from day one, but it sounds like it was a process of just becoming more comfortable with yourself, and therefore, like we talk about belonging a lot, belonging to yourself, and even like belonging to Brooke. Like you didn't need to fit this like firefighter image to fit in and to derive the sense of like value and belonging, because you were deeply, like probably slowly but surely and messily, like accepting and deepening into who you authentically are. Like just the way that I'm experiencing you even right now is like you just feel really settled in your Daveness. And that probably took a while.
Oh yeah. And there's definitely consistencies in like weekly, monthly practice that encourage that in all of us, right? And then there's the times where you're just getting run around, and that can be life, and then you're feeling totally pulled away from who you are. So like one of the like my hero of my faith journey is Richard Rohr. I don't know how much of you've read or listened to him. He has been profoundly impactful for me. Tremendous, right? And he comes from a Franciscan, slightly more Eastern, somewhat philosophical, but with also like dogmatic traditions of the Catholic faith. Like what a weird blend.
Yeah.
And he is like speaking truth. And one of the things that he discussed in a book that I read is true self, false self. That's throughout all sorts of other religions and spirituality. But it's the idea of who is the individual that I am beyond any sort of social implication, right? Because everything from being an early child is needs met, and then it's meeting needs, and what is the reward based on that social interaction, right? From very like first days on, right? And it was like such a mind-bending concept for a while. Like, well, how is that even possible? You know, like this is the lives that we live in. And then you're like, no, that there really is something there if we take the time to sit within ourselves. One of the words we discussed in preparation was curiosity, to be curious about yourself, right? Like in a very compassionate way, but wow, that's interesting. Why do I respond in that way, right? Why does that thing seem to make me happy? That thing seems to make me angry. That thing seems to make me sad. Is there something beneath that that's maybe more stable that I could participate in? So yeah, without being able to say directly how I got to this place, that is a concept I've been trying to digest and apply for a while.
Have you heard of internal family systems?
No.
Okay. IFS, that what you're describing reminds me a lot of internal family systems. It's like parts work, this part of you that comes up, but you're, people can speak about this much more eloquently, but like there's the true self.
Yep.
And as the self, you talk to these parts that are coming up to protect you, to manage, to whatever the thing is that you're trying to avoid. But essentially you're trying to get back to that self that's in there beyond all those parts that have come up from childhood, from relationship, from all these things. And so that's like very similar work. Yeah.
And like not shaming those parts when they pop up in new situations. Like you were saying, sometimes you get pulled away from yourself, and like part of the work we want to do in this conversation is like humanizing all of it, you know, like not saying we have Dave and we're like putting him up on a pedestal to show you like what healthy masculinity is like, and everyone do what he does. But like what I'm loving from this is just unpacking, like there's faith that you had and that you lost, and there's ways, like identities that you tried on, and then you're like, I want to take these off. And it's just like, and now here you are sitting with us, embracing it all as best you can. And there could be those coping mechanisms or those things we've tried on in the past that we like put back on to protect ourselves in the present. And yeah, I find myself like, this is so interesting, but as you're talking to me, I can't help but this could be judgy of me. I'm just going to own that. But I'm like,
you're in good company.
You got an Enneagram
I
1.
tend to do that on occasion daily.
I have a judgmental part, and like I also can get on a little bit of like a rant about how humans are just judgmental and we're all just trying to pretend like we're not. Anyway, we'll put that aside for now. But like I am just kind of struck by, am I really talking to a firefighter right now? Like you're a little bit of judgment around the stereotypes.
Okay, in what way? Define that.
I think that you briefly named it a little while ago, and I think I'm wanting to kind of camp out and like, because I don't know, I'm an outsider looking in, but more so the stereotype of like you said, how did you phrase it earlier? This like super masculine, like type A type of man, and then what stuck out to me is you said, because you kind of have to be. So not so much I'm like judging firefighters. I'm immensely grateful to firefighters, like especially us living in California. And but this hyper masculine And sometimes that could present in an unhealthy way. And what I imagine, and you could tell me if I'm just a judgmental asshole and I'm off here, but that it would be a very effective coping strategy to completely hide behind that and not take what I would say that you take in the introspective route of, is this really who I am? Do I need this to belong? And so I'm kind of just like almost wanting to get into your world a little bit more. Like, what is that world actually like? Where am I judging too harshly? How do you find yourself hanging on to yourself in that environment?
Yeah, so you're not judging too harshly.
Okay.
You're pretty accurate in
Okay.
what you've perceived. So when I talk to my girls about work, I say, just picture a fraternity house.
Okay.
All right. But like nobody grew up from college. They're still in the fraternity mentality. That's right. Like I said, right, wrong, and indifferent. There's never been a time in my life that I've been more affirmed that to each their own. Right.
Sure.
But for myself, that came with some just huge cautionary flags, mostly the hiding, like you're saying, behind the masculinity. So weakness is not tolerated, not allowed, never shown. So I've done a lot of work in studying PTS around first responder experiences. And forever I thought it was the trauma, because I've had some pretty negative impacts of trauma. And then there was a very extensive study that was done by the National Fire Administration that found out that trauma is a component, but it's not the highest degree of impact in post-traumatic stress for firefighters. It's prolonged work hours, interrupted sleep, unclear work expectations, and then, shocker, a like zero ability to fail social environment. So anytime somebody does anything weird, mistake, anything, they're going to jump all over that shit. Right. And I say necessary. And the reason I say necessary is there is a degree, especially for myself, that I've become, I have like these super bizarre, emotional, empathetic, ridiculous antennas that has made this job uber challenging for me. I don't think everybody's coming from that place. But for myself, I know on these calls, like, oh, wow, this is going to take me to a bad spot. And I also know, okay, how can I limit my emotional interaction with this situation to compartmentalize to do a good job, right? That's what I'm here for. And I feel still tremendously passionate about that. And so we have a breed of humans that's exceptional at compartmentalizing out of necessity, but then they think that they carry that compartmentalizing into their normal lives. And we know that that's just not true.
It's not
right?
true.
Yeah, you can maybe do that for the 5 minutes, 20 minutes necessary on a scene, but that's going to have lasting impact in your life. And so you see just a group of individuals where weakness is exploited in a negative way, right? And compartmentalization is kind of exalted, right? That's put on a pedestal. Like, wow, yeah, if you can stuff it down and get it done. So,
It's
and
so
I work with some,
I'm like, the language I'm hearing from you is like, it's such a dehumanizing experience. Everything you just listed is like pretend or shut down, or, I mean, you're cutting off so many important parts of yourself. It gives me more empathy, you know?
I'll even notice for myself, because I am in a like middle of the road leadership position, but I notice, because I'm a cheerleader and I feel the importance of rallying and encouraging people, that I will like get up for the moment going into work when that's not really where I'm coming from. And so I've had to balance the like, yeah, I don't have the energy today, or something I never learned in my early self, never learned, like, I'm a part of this equation. I can choose myself. Still struggling with that.
Yeah.
My therapist, as of recent, said you have to go home and choose something to eat that's work for someone else, even though you know they don't want to do it, just because you want it. And it was like, oh no!
As an
Why do you
Enneagram
hate
2,
I was
me?
gonna say, I'm hearing that Enneagram too.
As a 2?
That is so unkind and so necessary.
You're like, I need a new therapist.
Yeah.
This homework's getting too hard.
So I think all of us, right, we do that,
Yeah.
especially in those performance-based arenas, and work is scrutinized all the time. And that's not intentional. That's, I think, more or less unconscious, similarly to how people think that they can continue the compartmentalized lifestyle. And then we have awful statistics around things just falling apart later in life, right? Especially out of, psychological, undiagnosed, awful suicide rates, people that are just totally surviving off of substance abuse, those sort of things.
Yeah.
So.
Like you said, like dehumanized, and like that's absolutely true. And at the same time, like how could you survive that job and not compartmentalize? Like it is actually a skill. You know, all of our coping strategies are skills. But I think what's breaking my heart and like also giving me empathy is like a lot of them, it sounds like, don't have the tools to then carry on in their normal lives in a healthy way. It has to stay in that coping mechanism space. And then, you know, I can imagine that substance abuse sounds like this is the only way I can handle this. So I'm curious. It doesn't sound to me like, I don't know you very well. I'm not like, so I don't know, but it doesn't sound to me like you exist in that space a lot. It sounds like you're very like intentional and thoughtful, and you said you're in like a leadership position. I'm curious, like how have you navigated this for yourself? And has there been opportunity? Because you said people just kind of accept you. Like they're watching you, they see the way you live. Like, has that had any impact? And
that's definitely an interesting part of my story and a long journey. I feel super fortunate and also really disappointed in the time frame that I became a firefighter. So my father was also a firefighter. Obviously his experience was nuanced and with good and bad as well. But seemingly external, as at least as a young man, it was very positive, very, very positive. In the time frame that I got hired, we just have had an interesting combination, specifically in Southern California, where things have kind of just gotten off the rails a little bit, and money being the main driver of like reward for your time away, and what maybe some of the negative impact is, and that kind of being like the only thing of, hey man, you're making good money, so you should be happy, right? And money's never really been a good motivator for me, so that didn't really line up. But the positive about, so that's created a really strong negative, because there's just an unbelievable work expectation of employees, just too busy, too awake at night, not understanding the negative impact towards long-term health, especially psychologically. Because, hey man, you're here extra days, even if you don't want to be, you're making really good money. It's all good, right?
The trade-off,
I'm like, not good.
Yeah.
So I personally got to a point, because Brooke and I have tried to live as much as possible in Southern California, which is a moving, failing target all the time, conservative financial lifestyle, so that I wouldn't have to work as much, right? So then I found myself in a situation where I was being forced to when I didn't have the need. And that just broke me. So through the COVID years, one of the ways that a lot of agencies saved money is they had a buyout for people to leave, because there was so much for people to retire early, that there was such a like an unknown around what would be the economic situations in these cities, counties, and states. And so they were looking for opportunities to kind of reel things in, understandably. In the same time, right, the workload is increasing exponentially, and now you're having to fill in all the extra shifts that the people have vacated, and then everything's on hiring freezes, and it's just years of your life you're not sure if you're coming or going or which way's up and down. And if you want to, we can go into more detail, but I found myself down a very dark and depressed and sad state, right? But the positive of why I'm really thankful the time frame that I've had to do this job and live this experience is there is just so much information out about the negative long-term impacts of chronic stress, sleep interruption, trauma, and a ton of treatment modalities, right? And I will say my agency, because of the concerted effort of a few of my respected friends, like I have therapy paid for that I've accessed and has had like game-changing impacts in my life.
Wow.
yeah, I don't really know what the situation would be without that. And I'm thankful that it is because of that. So,
Is that what pulled you out of that dark place?
several things. So, Brookie and I've had to man, I know that it's just not realistic that you're going to have this in a spouse all the time, but someone that is just that true confident that just sees you and wants the best for you. Gosh, she's sorry. You can tell she's not like, we talk about life all the time. This is totally stolen from Rob Bell, but of bass notes and treble notes. She's a treble note, high frequency, always buzzing around person, but she's bass notes when I need her. Right. She knows when to let me be. She knows when to call me out. She knows when to motivate. She knows when to encourage. So she's hands down, far and away, the biggest reason why I'm in the situation I'm in, and that situation is mostly positive. As far as like having what I would say is mental gains or achievement over the things that I couldn't get past on my own, 100% therapy. Yeah, without a question. And for years, I was our peer support coordinator, which is something we've identified that, hey, we should have a group of peers that cares about the overall well-being of each other. And so uniquely, I was privy to a lot of the more current information, right? And programming, and not afraid to step out and try some of those things that maybe some of my coworkers have still avoided. So yeah, so I've had ongoing talk therapy for a number of years. Probably the thing that's been the most dramatic impact when we're reaching something that's beyond just verbal processing is I've done EMDR several times.
Do you want to say what that is for anyone who doesn't know?
EMDR is, as a participant, is some woo-woo nonsense. After studying, looking into it, and then seeing the practical, tangible benefit in my life, I would say it's profound. It's incredible. So EMDR is a therapy that's supposed to mimic REM sleep. And REM sleep is where we process the day's events. So our mind is saying, yes, that's useful. No, I don't need that. Oh, that had something of significant importance. I better tuck that away for later if I'm in this situation. And what we find with trauma is that our brains just don't know where to put it. And so a friend of ours, a doctor on a retreat we were on, kind of helped improve my understanding of that. Forever, it was explained to me like you took a file drawer, you had all the papers kind of hanging out of it, and you slammed it shut, and they were still just sticking out this way and every way, and you didn't know what to do. It's been better explained to me now that it's kind of swirling in the background of your mind constantly. And then when we have something, right, whether sight, smell, some sort of trigger that goes back to that response, then we have a very visceral reaction in our life. So I have a few of those, like big T, little t. That's probably language you're familiar with. So just awful events that are kind of the big T. And then the little t is just the accumulation of stressors over life. And I actually think the big T things like make sense, right? Because they're so in your face and grotesque and tragic and a total affront to what we think and believe the human experience to be. But the little t's, the accumulation over time, is what it caught up to me.
Sneaky.
Very sneaky. And it's a slow slide. So it's like, I felt like I was keeping all the things in the air, still doing a good job at work, even though I was kind of miserable in that existence. I put the highest value of everything I'm doing in life in parenting. I want to be the best dad possible. Work's compromising that. So I'm kind of pissed off about that, but I'm still trying to do my best there. And then the combination of the accumulation of that and a faith transition where the structure that which you grew up on wasn't working, wasn't serving you anymore. Everything you'd had in your life experientially was kind of an affront to the simple basic answers, and the world kind of comes crashing down. So yeah, with a thing that the moment that I can distinctly remember is Brooke's dad passed away, and Brooke's been my rock, right? We had something come up with a daughter that was kind of out of left field and unexpected for us. We had to get some professional therapy help there too. And I was still just doing what I do as a 2. I'm keeping everything going. I'm getting her out for walks, trying to give her lots of water, to do healthy activity through grieving. You know, do you want to discuss this further? Are you contacting your sisters? I'm dialed into my daughter and talking to our friend that's getting us really good insight and help. And then Brooke's like, when's the last time you showered?
Wow.
Dude, have you changed your clothes in a couple days? And it was like, dude, what is happening to me? Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I'm super fortunate that I've had those moments that have kind of shooken me and woken me up.
Yeah, that I'm curious, if you don't mind me jumping in here, like that immense self-sacrifice. And like we were talking about, like attributing this to firefighters, but like I do have curiosity around all humans being afraid to share weakness, but especially show weakness, but especially men. And like what I'm hearing in this moment, and as you're tearing up, which you're like, I'm so grateful. It feels like a generous gift that you're sharing your emotion with us. It was like in that moment, Brooke humanized you and said, "Oh, this, like you can show weakness." I know I'm putting words into people's mouths, but
yeah.
I'm just kind of seeing the thread here of like, it's immensely uncomfortable. Like, well, one, as an Enneagram 2, like, and I could feel this from you. You like serving people and you like making sure people are taken care of. And you have a lot of love to give, but there's also this like, without even realizing it, this self-sacrifice because you can't show weakness. And I'd like to throw it back to you there. Like, does that resonate? I don't want to assume, but just like the beauty of that story where she was able to reflect and be that mirror to you, like, hey, you matter too. And how often, or I just wonder if that is like felt rare.
Yeah, if I'm thinking about how is that possible that would accumulate to that point. Obviously it's way too many nights without sleep, which we know is like most psychological disorders have some sort of compromised sleep. So now we're just inducing that on people that don't have it, or compounding the potential of having it. Sleep is where our bodies heal itself, right? It's where we identify cellular waste and things that are broken down and send a response for repair. And if you don't have that, then you're just breaking down. And that's physically, emotionally, spiritually. For me, it was all of those things. But yeah, what's interesting is when I look at how the work thing compounded, right? And I'm still totally cool with the 2 that I am in my home life, right? Because Brooke has been a person that's not going to take advantage of that, right?
Yeah.
She's trustworthy. And so she knows when my giving is beyond what it should be and doesn't extend it. And she knows that one of the things I like to do is guys that are off duty for injury, because it's such that population is specifically vulnerable. I'll just grab them for lunch, take them out to coffee, and she'll be like, is that what you need this week? Right. Beautiful. She knows where to buffer me. So I have that voice that's advocating for myself, which I didn't learn very well on my own. So if I had to reduce that down to one thing, my parents were exceptional parents, like exceptional. There was never a question of being loved. There was never a question of me being a priority. There was never taking the opportunity to teach the greater thing in life. Like, they nailed it. 10 out of 10 out of 10. Wow. Right? However, like I'm learning for myself as a parent that's had a high value in that, I'm doing all sorts of things that are going to make my kids tremendously wacky, right? Yeah. And they're going to need to learn and understand and grow from those places, most likely with professional help, the same way that I have. And one of the lasting words from my early childhood was potential. You're not reaching your potential. And I know now as a parent, they meant that in a positive way. They thought the world of me. They knew that I could accomplish a lot. And maybe more than I was accomplishing in cleaning my room and getting grades, right? The things to them that was like, dude, you have so much more potential than this. But what happened into adulthood was no matter the job I was doing, no matter the amount I was giving, even if it was done to the highest degree of excellence, I felt like, man, it's just not quite there. Right. Yeah. So I've had to walk that back a little bit, have some grace for myself and for all people that generally, unless you're just an asshole, everybody's doing their best. Right. And even those people are probably coming from some place of wounding. That's not their conscious choice. So
Definitely.
And think about like the faith thread that's here too, because when I hear you talking, I'm like, there's so much about the kind of evangelical Christianity that we grew up in that also highly values service and self-sacrifice in the name of service and losing self in the name of service. And it doesn't start from a bad place, but it corrodes really quickly, you know? And so I like see that thread in here too, just like unlearning where your value is too.
Yeah, those two experiences paralleled each other and then compounded. I would say the rug being pulled out from underneath you, or the floor dropping out. So yeah, it probably in a similar time frame, maybe a little bit ahead in my faith journey. The same way that it was like, wait a second, so like 97% of the world's population just believes what their parents believed or is normally socially acceptable in whatever area they lived in, and they're all condemned to death. Not adding up, right? And that sent me just on the biggest of journeys, just a stupid amount of reading and podcasting, and the conclusion at all of that was like, there's really smart people that have invested a lot of time on very specific nuanced details around every single religion or spirituality, and they're all at odds, right? Nobody knows definitively. And that definity, right, is what all humans are craving. We love certitude because it makes us feel safe, right?
Yes.
So I had to do a lecture on change and human behavior around change to firefighters, which was also a super like welcomed subject.
Yes,
right?
I'm sure.
And I found it remarkable. I came across a study that had participants, they were hooked up, they would measure like how their pupils dilated and pulse and respirations, and then they had this what I understood at least to be kind of like a video game where there was a display and there was going to potentially, you were going to find, oddly enough, all over the room here, a snake. And if you found that snake, the snake would jump out and it would buzz the participant.
Okay.
Like a little like zip.
Yeah.
Right. And what they found was the highest stress response was when it was 50-50. You couldn't guess. So if there was a visual cue, whether it was in the rock formation or if you saw some discoloration or you thought, I think there's a snake there, you were less negatively impacted than if you had no idea, right? Obviously the best, if you felt confident it's not there, just slightly less. If you knew it was there, oh my God, I'm freaking out if it's uncertain. And so what I found in faith specifically is that it was a structure for certitude, right? And an algorithm for if you do this and this and this, it equals this. And man, I feel really good and safe around that.
Oh, yeah.
So my friend, Father Richie, as I like to refer to him,
Father Richie.
if we ever cross paths, I hope he's okay that I use that
I think he would
term.
be.
I think
just
so
really
too.
do.
When Brooke and I talked about him, I always refer to him as Father Richie. Father Richie has a thing where these structures existed in your life so that you could build them and realize they got you nowhere, but you could build upon that for the next. It was the foundation. And so where the rug had been pulled out from under me as a firefighter, man, I had a very different expectation of what this was going to be. I'm feeling very empty. I don't feel like anybody's seeing this in a bigger framework. I'm suffering and it doesn't feel like a lot of people care. And then this faith around certitude was also losing its certainty, right? Or its appeal to me. It has been a lot of years to come back and to say with humility, everyone in every one of those arenas was doing what they thought was best. It was so that I could get to the point at which I could build the next on today. So, but yeah, that's the elimination of ego, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Like you're pulling on a ton of threads that me and Kristina have in our private conversations about how when we grasp so tightly to certainty, I don't want to make it sound too simple, but it's kind of a formula for dehumanizing ourselves and maybe others.
Yeah.
Because we need it to be a certain way so we're not scared. That 50-50 snake thing, I was like, oh my gosh, that is what my anxiety feels like when you're not sure which way it's going to go. And it would feel so much smoother to just have the answers and then tell everyone else, okay, I figured out what's good. I'm certain. And so now you need to come along with me. And what I'm hearing from you is in your journey, similar to our journeys, you've slowly learned to put that down and not like destroy it. Like you said, it's a foundation to build on and actually examine, who do I as an individual, like what do I want to take with me and what do I want to change, and how can I look out at everyone else and see that they're probably trying to do that same process for themselves in this extreme like fear of uncertainty. I feel like it's incredibly brave to hold uncertainty in the way you're describing.
Yeah, it's super weird though. I was talking with Brooke about this because she has a dream board where everything on that dream board came to fruition. And I was like, do you think that the dream board was accomplished because of your intention, right? Or do you think that you were accessing the spirit of a higher power that allowed these things to be accomplished? Because he prays for them daily. And I was like, far beyond me to say what is what, but it is a curious thought of, does our intention create meaning, right? And then at what point are we now doing that in a way that is manipulative or coercive or looking to capitalize on somebody else, whether that be power seeking or monetary, that now we've lost what the intention was. But yeah, both those exist. Like we could talk about, I think we'll go back to firefighting because I have a lot to say about stress actually and kind of what happens in the brain and what we should be doing about it and how that parallels to all of our crazy lives. But in marriage, like I gave in 100% to the concept that Brooke and I was going to work forever and be the most fulfilling relationship in my life. And it is. But other people set out with that same intention and it's not.
Yeah.
Right? So was it the intention? Were we just absurdly lucky? Are we creating meaning that's really not there? I have no idea.
Me either.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it. I mean, I know when I got divorced, we talked about this. We got married young too, my ex and I, and it's like, and seeing the different ways it can play out. Is it luck? Did we blow it? Did we, was it just this different path that we took, or should we have been X, Y, Z? And I think there's this element of intention, this element of luck, this element of the messiness of not knowing. The uncertainty piece, I think, can give you like a wider lens to hold beauty in life, because when things are certain, we lose our appreciation for them too. When things are uncertain, you have to like kind of ground in a little bit too. But yeah, I know we've talked about that concept. It's like, it's working for you and that's great. As long as it is, I'm like team Dave and Brooke. I love it. You know?
Yeah. Well, I think then, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, you go for
and
it.
say the humility to say like, oh, we're not doing this rightly.
Yeah.
And that's why we're reaping the reward. We are just profoundly lucky. There's a guy in my entry, it had such a lasting impact. It was my entry test to be a firefighter in a hall filled with thousands of people. And he goes, I'd wish you luck, but I don't believe in luck. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And it was like lasting. Like her and I have invested a lot in that relationship. Like I'm happy to claim that. And we've been given an opportunity that's had highs and lows and somehow been able to navigate that together, which is super bizarre and totally uncommon. And so it's the humility to say like, yeah, we've worked really, really hard here to create our own luck. And then also, I'm sorry, the confidence to say we've worked really hard here to create our own luck. And then the humility to say, wow, we were so lucky, beyond anything that we were doing, especially at the age that we were and the unknowns of what could happen in the future. We're just going to savor this partnership. So, yeah.
A lot of mystery there. And I really appreciate the humility that you talk about it with. And I'd like to wonder at, I was going to say assume, I wonder at if part of it is you and Brooke both deeply engaging in your own individual process.
Yes. Actually, our daughters are starting to date. It's been an interesting process to be a part of.
Wow. We
So
both have
crazy.
young kids, so
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, wow, that's
Yeah. Well, remember we got started extra
Yeah.
early, off and running. Yeah. So my daughters are 18, and 16 next week in a couple of days. So yeah, they're in a totally different transition. And I always think about people with young kids with just an overwhelming sense of, oh my God, you're so in it. Oh my gosh. Whatever. Yeah.
We're like,
it
yeah,
just
we are. Thank you.
requires so much of you. So
Yeah.
then to have the ambition to do something like this, like kudos to you. Yeah. And it's important.
Thanks, Dave.
Brooke did that when the girls were 5 years old, going back to yoga training.
Yeah.
And it's been the hugest benefit in her life, their life, and in our relationship that she established this idea of her individuality, even as a wife and as a mom. And I'm seeing that now in our daughter's dating relationship. We were just emphasizing with, we go out to dinner with all the parents and kind of formulate our
so
game
smart.
plan without being coercive, right?
Sure.
But like, hey, what's the things you're trying to accomplish, and how are you messaging this to your kid, and are we in alignment there or not? And so all of us are feeling this crazy moment of like, wow, this is the last months they'll be in this home.
Wow.
Right. And so like, what are the things that are important that you guys want to get done in the next few months, so we're not infringing on that? Blah, 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 blah. So it comes back to the idea of, hey, it's really important. We all felt this the other night. It's really important that they maintain their individuality. Right. And I have seen that for Brooke and I, just play out time and time and time again. That is not as natural to me. She's very good at that. But she's also fiercely advocates for the things she wants in life. So, and I respect the hell out of that.
Yeah.
That's been learned for me, and kind of how we were talking through true self, false self, and then that word of curiosity, getting curious about yourself, that you are okay and want to spend time with yourself, and you're reflecting on what is the things that I enjoy for myself beyond anyone else, has been instrumental for me.
Wow.
Like,
yeah.
so good. And I am a super social introvert. I love people to death. I always leave physically tired.
Same.
Always.
I can relate to that.
So I've started to realize like, wow, you really enjoy spending time with yourself. And so when the calendar's not permitting that, I know that I need to make that a priority for myself. Right.
That self-awareness has just shown through this whole conversation. And as we're kind of wrapping up here, I just want to thank you so much. This feels like such a gift to, I'm thinking back to like your first question for us at the top of this conversation. Like, can you speak to like why a man on Good Girl Gone Human? And I'll say selfishly, it's really a gift to hear a man speak about his self-awareness journey, advocating for his own needs while also like showing up powerfully with a lot of strength for California as a firefighter, for the other firefighters, advocating for them to get what they need. Hearing a little bit about your fatherhood journey, I'm kind of feeling like a part 2 with like parenting, but I just want to say thank you for sharing. There's so many beautiful threads here that feel exactly what we want to do here is unpack people's stories, just create space for you. Like, it's such a generous gift that you took the time to share all of these threads in your journey from good to being the most Dave you can be, and acknowledging with humility that it's not perfect and it's messy, and for sharing your like the beautiful joy and love you have for your wife Brooke. And I just feel like so much gratitude for you sharing your vulnerability here with us. And I'm just curious if, like, as we're kind of winding down here, if there's anything else you'd like to leave us with here.
Sure. Yeah, maybe a part 2, only because I have studied post-traumatic stress so much and know what's occurring, at least on a very rudimentary level, in a way that's, I think, tangible to a lay person what's happening in the brain, how that's encouraging certain networks of activity and thought, and how those are usually counterproductive to overall health. And then some practical ways. So one of my biggest concerns is because I like thinking about the world in a philosophical context, is that because I'm spinning in these abstract thoughts that it's not landing the plane, it's not practically applicable. So I just listened to a podcast on Dan Dennett, and the interviewer's like talking about memes stacking and creating consciousness, and whether or not Dan is talking, the interviewer's asking him if like that is the next iteration of natural selection and it's unconscious to us, but it's really happening. And then in the middle of it, the interviewer goes, but how does that help me get a good cup of coffee? And I love that.
Right.
I love that. Like, let's dabble in all these crazy conversations, but then what's the moving point forward? And so the things that I do think that I have done well there is I've tried a lot of things and found very practical applications of those concepts. So if that works for you, maybe we'll find a time to discuss.
Absolutely.
If you move on to another topic, so be it. I know you have
circle
a
around.
lot to cover. Yeah, kind of the last thing for me, maybe wrapping up some of those concepts, is one of the last things that I read from Father Ritchie, because I would say over the few years previous, I had like a full-blown midlife crisis. What am I doing? I have to do something different. This is crazy. And I read a book by Father Ritchie, my trusted resource on spirituality. And he has a book called Falling Upward. And it's basically navigating a midlife crisis. It's like, hey, you had this ego that constructed all this of yourself to find out that, I got to the top of the mountain and I'm miserable. Now what? And the lasting message from it is that you participate in the world with still the same care for the things that you want to accomplish or be involved in, but you realize it's not working against you. If it doesn't get as far as you want, it's okay. Like, it's the participation without the negative visceral response, because that response is the ego. It's not the work, right? And so there's like a story where a guy's pushing a stone up a hill and he gets to the top of the hill and he's miserable. This is his existence for all of his life. And it 100% mirrors our existence in life, right? And they're like, oh, maybe he would be happy if he erected a temple. Well, he does, and then the temple falls down. Well, maybe he would be happy if this, maybe happy if this, maybe happy if this. And what it boils down to is, if he's happy pushing the rock, he's happy, right? And so my concern sometimes in this like post-deconstructed generation is that we're trying to find the solve when really we need to just be happy with pushing the rock, right? But not in a way that doesn't claim like our hurts and the things that we've been through, and know that that compromises our ability to do that. And then at some point, just let it be. Yeah. So,
Wise.
yeah. And to you two, I see you. I see the work that you're doing. It's valuable. Even though I said we can talk at length, but it doesn't matter. It matters, right? Because it encourages others to do the same. And I know you, my little one, I don't know your Enneagram number. Holly, what's your Enneagram number?
Probably 6, but I don't
It's
know.
fluid.
Been on a journey with that.
I do think it can change, right?
I think so. I was a 6 when I found the Enneagram, and now I'm on to human design. So maybe I'm
awesome.
a 4, but also saying I'm a 4 just stokes my ego. So that's probably not what I like the idea of being a 4 too much. So I'm probably a 6.
Yeah.
Got it.
For now, we'll say 6 with an asterisk.
Well, I know for Kristina, and I get the sentiment that it's similar for you, that you guys want to do things to an excellent degree.
True.
And yes, that's because there's been some social reward and benefit and affirmation when you've accomplished things to that way. But I want you to know you and who you are is excellent beyond the performance, beyond the feedback. It will be excellent because it's who you are. Okay.
Thanks.
So
Dave.
with love and gratitude, namaste.
Namaste.
That's from my beautiful wife.
Oh, that's for
Brooke.
Ricky. Dave, it is the delight of my life to have you here. I just adore you, truly. I have moments in my life that in quiet and subtle ways and more obvious ways you've been there for me. And so it feels just really uniquely special to have you be there for me in this way as our first guest. And so I don't take it lightly. I appreciate your perspective. I think your voice matters, and I know it matters. We have had an episode on pedestalizing, and I have talked before about how I have to actively work not to pedestalize you and Brooke and your marriage, and kind of reframing that and letting you both be human and letting your stuff be messy. And so hearing even the whole spectrum of your humanity and welcoming that here, and still allowing what you guys have to be really beautiful and celebrated and honored too at the same time, finding that balance. And so I am so grateful. I know that everyone who has listened can see themselves in your story in all these different ways. And at a minimum, just the curiosity, leaning into curiosity, and mainly curiosity about yourself and what it means to care for ourselves as human, and take ourselves off this pedestal that we try to put ourselves on. Mm-hmm. I see you doing that work, and I just love you and your family, and I'm so grateful for this time. I see the ways. I love your tenderness, because I just feel like you're such a fun, juxtaposition of this, you're a crying firefighter, and I just love both parts of that. I can't
get away from it. I tried for a long time. It's who I am.
And I'm so glad that you haven't gotten away from it. It's what I love about you. And as I think about, our little send off, I'm just like, it's you. And I say it to you too. And I say it to all of our listeners as we close up, just to remember that you're an absolute badass and the most fragile thing, and that you get to treat yourself as both. And so thank you, Dave. We're so grateful for this conversation. We'll see you again soon.
Amen.
Oh, yes.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.